Young, DeWitt, Lewis, McGallis, Melvin, Troyani, and Chairman Dillard are all also present.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes from the meeting held on January 21st, 2016. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, can I have a motion to accept? Director Hobson, seconded by Director Frega. Secretary, please call roll.
Director Durrani.
Aye.
Director Frega. Director Hobson.
Aye.
Director Pang. Director Ross. Director Totten. Director Fuentes.
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next is a report on the regional peer review and sub-regional peer review. Karen? Good morning.
On top.
Sorry about that.
Get to sit, and there's your.
Okay. Good morning. I'm here today to present the regional and sub-regional peer review reports. These are the second half of the performance measure reports that we prepare each year here at the RTA. The first set included the regional report card and the sub-regional report. Those were completed and presented in the fall by Donna Anderson. Those reports focused on our own service boards and contained analysis and discussion of 1- and 5-year trends. The reports being presented today instead focus on how the Chicago service boards perform in comparison to their peers. The reports are prepared with input from a task force comprised of members from each service board and satisfy requirements set forth by the 2008 RTA Act Amendment. The peer reports use the most recent data published from the Federal Transit Administration's National Transit Database, or NTD, for the 2014 report year. NTD released this data in mid-January following a period of data verification. This database provides us with standardized, consistent data that we can use to look at what our peers are doing. The full reports were mailed with the board briefing packets earlier this month. This is the 8th time we're presenting the regional peer review, which covers the top 10 largest metropolitan regions in the U.S., with Chicago being the 3rd largest. This report pulls together data from the main transit providers for each region. So for the Chicago region, we have aggregated data for CTA, Metra, and PACE, but other regions may have more providers, such as Los Angeles with 12, or as few as 1 provider, such as the case with Boston and Houston. Altogether, there are 42 transit agencies included within this report. The sub-regional peer review is being presented for the 6th time. This report examines performance for each mode separately. So we have CTA Bus and CTA Rail, Metra, and PACE Suburban Bus, Vanpool, and ADA Paratransit. For this report, we've chosen 5 peers to compare to each Chicago operator for each mode. Both reports use 4 categories to evaluate performance. Coverage describes how much service we provide and how much customers actually use. Efficiency and effectiveness evaluates the level of resources spent to provide that service. Maintenance and capital investment refers to the allocation of capital funds to replace and maintain infrastructure components. And solvency refers to the financial condition and the ability to meet operational and capital needs. In a nutshell, what we see with the regional peer review is that the Chicago region had strong performance overall. We ranked in the top half for 15 of 16 measures, and in the top 3 for 7 of those. Chicago does not rank in the bottom 3 for any of the measures contained within the report. We saw 5 rank position changes in 2014. We saw improvement for 1 measure, no change for 11, and 4 rank position declines. And I'll go through each of those as we go through the presentation. The next slides are a series of charts for each of the 4 performance categories. The charts provide the rank performance from 1 to 10 for each measure, with 1 being the most favorable position and 10 being the least favorable. Chicago's performance is highlighted by an orange box, so you can easily see where Chicago ranks in position to its peers. Here you can see strong performance for Chicago relative to its peers in the service coverage category, with each result in the top half. For each of the 5 measures shown here, Chicago's ranking has remained unchanged since 2011. As you can see, New York ranks highest for each coverage measure, or each service coverage measure. 7 of the regions, including Chicago, reported ridership declines in 2014. Despite the ridership decline, the Chicago region's annual passenger miles traveled still exceeded 4 billion for the 4th consecutive year. And this is significant because I can go back to 1991 with NTD records, and that 4 billion mark has only been achieved by Chicago 5 times. So it's the past 4 years and in 2008, which preceded the Great Recession. In contrast, New York's passenger miles traveled is closing in on 19 billion. So there's quite a big gap between first and second place. The next category is service efficiency and effectiveness, where again, we see strong performance for the Chicago region. The increase in Chicago's operating costs was held to 3.9%, which was better than the peer average increase of 4.7%. The only rank position change here is for the first measure, operating cost per unit of transit capacity, where Chicago went from 3rd place to 4th. Now the difference between 2013 and 2014 was 1 penny. What caused the downward move was that WMATA in Washington, D.C. had significantly reduced its paratransit fleet by about 30%, which raised its average transit capacity of its fleet. Most notably, Chicago retained its first place position for operating cost per passenger mile for the 4th consecutive year. An operating cost of 59 cents per passenger mile is 3 cents higher than 2013 and roughly 23% lower than the peer average. The third category of service is maintenance and capital investment. The first measure is for the percent of vehicles beyond the FTA recommended minimum useful life. Chicago ranked 9th for this measure as recently as 2011. Movement is of course related to vehicle replacements, but also due to the aging of peer region fleets. For example, Houston and DC both dropped several positions this year as large portions of their fleets hit their minimum useful lives. The Chicago percent of vehicles beyond useful life for 2014 was 27.5%, which was down over 2 percentage points from 2013. So with the percent of older vehicles getting lower, we should have more miles between major mechanical failures, right? Unfortunately, no, and we can blame this primarily on the polar vortex. You may recall that Chicago had ranked first for miles between major mechanical failures for several years in a row, then fell 2 positions to 3rd in 2013. When 2014 fell 1 more position as a significant number of weather-related challenges for Chicago in particular impacted the system. In fact, Chicago had the 2nd highest increase in the number of major mechanical failures for the year. If I were to keep that number of mechanical failures constant to 2013, we actually would have risen 1 rank position instead of falling 1. An important thing here to remember is that Chicago Transit as a system never completely shut down for bad weather, which has occurred in some of the other regions. The final slide for the regional peer review shows service level solvency, the service area in which we saw 2 measures go down in rank positions in 2014. Again, the Chicago region performed quite favorably in comparison to its peers and remained in the top 5 for each measure. Chicago actually saw a 6-cent higher average fare, or fare revenue per passenger trip, in 2014. Even without a fare increase, the average fare was higher as riders switched to using more pay-as-you-go type fares. Chicago swapped places with Philadelphia and dropped 1 rank position for fare recovery ratio. It's important to note here that SEPTA, the primary operator in Philadelphia, had implemented a sizable fare increase in the year, and the Chicago operators had not. Yet the difference between the 2 rank positions was only 1/10 of 1 percentage point. Chicago lost 1 rank position for capital program expenditures per resident to 4th place, as Los Angeles rose 4 positions, coinciding with the extension of their Gold Line light rail service, which just opened in March. The project added 11.5 miles of rail and 6 new stations and park and ride lots. Of course, New York continues to outspend all the peer regions in total capital dollars and per capita. They've got the largest system and have had to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to repair Superstorm Sandy damage from 2012, and they still have a long way to go. So to sum up the regional peer performance, Chicago performed quite well in comparison to its peers, with no rankings in the bottom 3 for any of the measures. Now we'll move on to the second report, the sub-regional peer review. The sub-regional report focuses on each mode by itself. So again, we have urban, bus, heavy rail, suburban bus, vanpool, ADA paratransit, and Metro commuter rail. The purpose of this narrowed focus is because there are no industry standards for performance measures, so comparisons to a set of similar peers helps us to establish benchmarks for performance. The sub-regional report also allows us to see the strengths and weaknesses of each mode and allows us to see any unique characteristics or circumstances that might constrain performance or point to potential areas for improvement. These pictures illustrate one unique characteristic of Chicago Transit, that Metro operates in a very complicated environment and shares track with freight. CTA also has a unique operating environment in that it has to navigate very tight curves of the Loop L system. This forces CTA to use much smaller cars than its peers, which have up to 2.5 times the capacity that CTA does, and allows them to have increased service effectiveness. So these are a couple things to keep in mind as we look at relative peer performance, because even though our rankings may be worse in some cases, they may not necessarily be things that we can control for. In some cases, our performance might be better year over year, but we may not see those changes reflected in the peer ranking positions. Overall, we see very strong performance in the efficiency and effectiveness measures, and we've seen this in prior years as well. CTA Bus continues to be a strong performer, ranking first or second for 9 of 11 measures. CTA Bus has kept its top ranking for operating cost per vehicle hour for 6 years in a row, and the top fare recovery ratio for 5 years in a row. CTA Bus only has one area where it doesn't meet or beat the peer average. That's for miles between major mechanical failures. In 2014, over half of the CTA Bus fleet had reached their midlife and were due for overhauls, a process that was underway throughout the year and continued throughout 2015. This measure was also heavily impacted by the polar vortex events in 2014. CTA Rail outperforms its peers for 6 of 11 measures, ranking first for 4. CTA had the top ranking for 2 measures of service efficiency and effectiveness, operating cost per vehicle hour for the 6th consecutive year, and top ranking for operating cost per passenger mile for the 4th consecutive year. It also ranked first for miles between major mechanical failures for the 4th consecutive year. In 2014, CTA added over 200 new rail cars into service, making its fleet the youngest and putting CTA in first place for average fleet age. Now keep in mind, CTA was in last place for this measure just 2 years ago for having the oldest fleet. Of course, just last week, CTA approved the largest rail car order in its history, so they'll be adding 846 new rail cars into service starting in 2020. Metro continues to outperform its peer average in 5 of 11 measures, including ranking first or second for each measure of coverage and efficiency and effectiveness. Metro has had the lowest operating cost per passenger mile for 3 consecutive years and has achieved the top ranking for passenger trips per vehicle revenue hour in 2014. After 2 years of having the oldest fleet among its peers, Metro moved up 1 rank position and shaved over 4 years off its average fleet age in 2014, which is pretty significant for 1 year. Just last month, Metro retired the last of its original Highliner cars, having replaced the entire Metro Electric District fleet. Metro has also identified a significant rail car purchase within its 2016 budget. Now, we've been reporting on peer performance for 6 years now, and for each year, Pace Bus has held first place ranking for operating cost per vehicle revenue hour, a measure of service efficiency. Pace also performs well for the reliability measure, miles between major mechanical failures, ranking second for 2 years in a row, despite ranking fourth for average fleet age. Pace is challenged in that it covers a huge geographic region that's triple the size of its next largest peer. This constrains performance in the coverage area, where we talk about trips per hour and trips per mile, as well as in the fare recovery ratio when we look at fare revenue relative to cost. Pace Vanpool's strength also lies in its low operating cost per vehicle revenue hour, ranking either first or second for this measure for each of the past 6 years. The Pace Vanpool program performance is significantly impacted by the lack of HOV lanes and the prevalence of reduced fare ADA vanpools, which comprise over half of its fleet. However, these vanpools are critical to the Chicago region because they reduce the dependency on high-cost paratransit trips. ADA paratransit service in the Chicago region continues to rank well among peers for 9 of 10 measures. ADA paratransits had strong performance in coverage and service efficiency and effectiveness areas, ranking second or third for each measure. We've also performed above the peer average for each measure of solvency. That concludes my presentation on the peer reports, but I also wanted to give you an update on the more recent 2015 ridership results, as we've done on a quarterly basis along with the financial report. On a monthly basis, we can access ridership data for our peers from the NTD. The ridership data is preliminary and not audited or final, but it does allow us to see current trends. This chart shows annual 2015 RTA system ridership changes by mode. Our service board's performance is shown by the blue bars, and the peer average is shown by orange dots. CTA bus ridership was 0.7% lower in 2015. CTA bus ridership fell 8% in 14, so although ridership is down for 2015, this is a significant improvement from last year's results. CTA rail ridership continued to improve, and I'm sure you've seen press releases that 2015 had the highest rail ridership in CTA's history. Metro's ridership dipped 1.8%, but it also had a fare increase in February, and the falling gas prices are contributing factors as well. Pace fixed route and Vanport ridership were down by 5% and 3.8% respectively through year-end 2015. For bus, this represents an improvement from what we reported last quarter, but Vanport ridership losses increased. Now, Vanport ridership tends to be more elastic than other modes and responds more quickly and significantly to changes in gas prices, which we've seen fall throughout the year. ADA paratransit ridership continued to grow and was up 2.6% compared to 2014. Here's a look at our 2015 peer regional ridership compared to 2014. This chart shows year-over-year regional ridership using the same peer metropolitan areas that we use in our annual peer review. Our ridership compares quite favorably and is basically stable with a slight 0.2% decline, although it is our third year of declining ridership. Houston stands out, having a notable ridership spike that resulted from a complete reconfiguration of its bus system to coincide with its light rail, which opened the green and purple lines in late May. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Chairman Dillard?
Yeah, just a couple. I spoke yesterday to the American Council of Engineering Companies, and just for the edification of the board, a statistic that T.J. Ross, the executive director of PACE, threw out that stuck with me that I really hadn't grasped, and for Jeremy LaMarche and others who go out and see members of Congress who are always concerned about PACE's ridership. Director Ross said that PACE is the 6th largest bus system in the United States, and sometimes that gets lost on people. So Jeremy and Leanne and others, I think Jim Smith may be out there in the audience. When we go to D.C., we need to incorporate in a little talking point, that PACE is a huge operation, the 6th largest bus system in the United States. On Houston, where you see that number for Houston, I do some business down in Houston, and Houston is projected to become probably the 2nd largest city in the United States within a number of years. Houston is an incredibly fast-growing city, and if you read the Wall Street Journal and other publications, it will soon surpass Chicago in its population. So a lot of that is just driven by tremendous population growth in the Houston area. If I could, can you give me those? I want to see the mechanical numbers for the CTA vis-a-vis the rest of the United States. I want to drill down on those numbers, and I want to get a better handle on the age of the CTA's fleet. I mean, I have a very good handle on where Metra is. TJ, listening to his presentation to these engineers, I kind of know where he's at. But I just want to focus on the CTA, and I think the CTA's and the mayor's announcement last week that they want to do $3 billion of rail car work in a partnership with a Chinese company in the historic Pullman area, is great news for economic development, aside from the fact of the need of the cars and the convenience of the riders going forward. I just thought that was an ingenious way to to package where the final assembly of these cars is being put together. On the chart on ADA paratransit of PACE, and I know there are a number of we board members who are always watching PACE's ridership very quickly. The one that was way up was ADA paratransit, which is also one of the targeted cuts of the state of Illinois, and that one just bears watching very, very, very closely as that one's only going to continue to grow as we age as a society, and I'm included in that group. But if there's state cuts and they're proposed to ADA paratransit, I just remind everybody what when Leanne and I visited with Jim Smith, the U.S. Department of Transportation, they said, Mr. Chairman, ADA paratransit is not a transit issue. It's a civil rights issue, and you are required by federal law to provide these services, whether or not the state cuts your funding or whatever. We have to provide it, and it's the fastest growing segment for PACE that's out there. But these statistics to me are incredibly important. It's a great way to gauge how we're doing. We're doing very well, but when we go down in 4 categories, I like the way we put together, what do we need to do? What's the red flag that drives some of these statistics? But the bottom line, and I think it's the most important statistic we have out there other than safety, is we continue to operate the lowest per cost passenger mile system in the country, and there's variables all the time. But in terms of bang for our buck, nobody does it better than our 3 service boards that are out there. And to me, that's the bottom line comparison of everybody in the country. And then last but not least, when you look at that chart, and it's just something that we harp all the time, and we've got agenda items today to give us firepower to go out and ask for more money. But we just, as a region, do not invest in mass transit like other peer cities do. Other peer cities put a huge premium on investing in mass transit, and while we're doing better, we need a state capital bill in the worst way possible. So everybody else gets it with respect to investing in mass transit. The CTA and Metro's taken it into its own hands. It's clear the CTA gets it. I think Mayor Emanuel gets it very well. But we just need to convince our state lawmakers, and to that extent, our congressional delegation. And our congressional delegation does get it. I mean, I've met with every member from Southern Illinois through Chicago, and they do get it, and they are allies of mass transit. But we just need to make mass transit, because it's more important today than I believe it's ever been to the economic vitality of our region. We just need infrastructure funding, and that will continue to raise our numbers. But overall, not a bad report considering what we operate under. But as long as we're the lowest operating cost per mile, to me, that's the critical number. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Karen. Great report.
And just before Karen steps down, though, I just want to thank Karen and for the great work that she does on these reports, because, as the chairman was sort of alluding to, these are not just go-to numbers and data that we can use in our conversations in Springfield, in Washington, just and around the region, but the service boards use them regularly as well. So it's a lot of hard work that sort of goes, sometimes it's behind the scenes, but I think it's been very useful work for all of us, so thanks.
Okay, next is the update on the Regional Consumer Marketing Program. Mark.
So thank you, directors. Today I'll be updating the committee on the performance of the Ride On regional marketing campaign, which launched in January of last year and is scheduled to run through summer 2017. As a reminder, the campaign was built on the premise that CTA, Metra, and PACE do more than simply get you from point A to point B. They help you maximize your lifestyle by saving you time, money, and even peace of mind. The campaign focuses on target markets outside of the traditional peak period, peak direction commute that makes up a significant proportion of our system's ridership. Instead, the campaign is mostly aimed at smaller markets such as the occasional riders, visitors, tourists, and reverse commuters. The three main objectives of the campaign are to increase awareness of transit, improve the perceptions of the transit system, and to grow ridership in the target markets. Through the first year of the campaign, our advertising performed very well, meeting or exceeding nearly all of our performance targets. A major focus of our media buying strategy is to take advantage of the digital advertising. Our ads are running as digital displays on various websites, Facebook, and as pre-roll video. In 2015, the digital advertising delivered over 90 million impressions, generating click-through rates well in excess of industry norms. Our financial targets, including cost per click, were lower than anticipated in 2015, resulting in more impressions than we anticipated. The call to action for our digital advertising is for consumers to use the RTA Trip Planner to help them navigate the region's transit system. Our digital ads generated over 2 million conversions in 2015, or occasions when customers use the RTA Trip Planner to plan their trip, get real-time information, or view a transit schedule. Trip Planner utilization in 2015 featured 10% more sessions, more times used, and 6% more unique visitors than it did in 2014. Apologize for this not showing up. It's supposed to be the TV ads. Cable TV and radio were also major tactics used in 2015. Nearly 8,000 15-second cable TV ads aired on a wide array of networks at various times of the day and week. We also sponsored 2,100 traffic, weather, news, and sports reports on a mix of radio stations that mirror the diversity of the region, reaching 3% more listeners than anticipated. Ride-on ads were also displayed on digital street-level billboards in downtown Chicago, neighborhood billboards within the city of Chicago, and on highway billboards throughout the city and the suburbs. Combined, the billboard ads garnered over 55 million impressions in 2015, over-delivering estimates by nearly 40%. Additionally, this past summer, we utilized street teams to engage with consumers out and about. Over 3 5-day activations, the street teams engaged more than 75,000 consumers, showing them how to use the RTA Trip Planner on tablets, encouraging them to use transit for their summer travel, and passing out maps and other promotional items. With more than 52 million visitors to Chicago in 2015, we also purchased ads in Choose Chicago's visitors' guides to reach consumers across the Midwest and around the world. The full-page ads in both editions, printed by Choose Chicago, reached more than 500,000 people combined. The guides were available across the Midwest region, downloadable from the internet, and at major attractions and hotels across the Chicago region. RTA and its partners conducted several waves of research leading up to and throughout the first year of the campaign. The findings from the research have been in line with the expectations established for this point in the campaign's life cycle. One key finding from our research is that the quality of the advertising has been high. The campaign has solid reach and is well recognized by consumers. Consumers who recognize the ads are able to appropriately link it back to the RTA and service boards at a high rate. By and large, consumers believe in the messaging of the advertisement, that transit is convenient and a great option for traveling, and they are showing an interest in using the transit system. The campaign has also been recognized by the advertising industry through the honor of receiving multiple prestigious awards, including the Telly and Platinum Marcom Awards. In regards to achieving the campaign objectives, the research shows we are making progress. Awareness of the service board brands, CTA, Metra, and PACE, has increased since the campaign launched, and we are seeing improvements in perceptions of the transit system. Our research team used an innovative technique called media mapping that shows when we control for certain variables, consumers that recognize the campaign hold more favorable perceptions of the service boards than non-recognizers. Some of the perceptions gauged in this analysis included whether transit offers a great value for the money, is family-friendly, and helps travelers make the most of their time. The research from year one of the campaign shows claimed ridership remaining flat, which is basically in line with last year's overall ridership. As we discussed last fall, The expectations for the first year of the campaign revolved around increasing awareness and improving perceptions. Though measuring the ridership impact of a marketing campaign such as Ride On is challenging because of the markets we are targeting, we are planning to utilize a variety of tactics to track progress against this objective through year 2 of the campaign. Through the first year of the campaign, we learned a series of lessons that are helping us optimize the campaign for 2016. We are increasing our spending during the spring and summer months, yet maintaining an always-on presence through fall and winter. We will highlight various benefits of transit in each batch of the creative that we produce so that the ads appeal to a wide array of customers. And we plan to increase our emphasis on CTA and PACE to help shape positive opinions of these brands. We are introducing Hulu, an online streaming TV service, to our mix of tactics and increasing our use of video to expand the reach of the campaign. We also plan to integrate the Ventra mobile app into the campaign where appropriate to supplement and complement the efforts of the service boards. Over the last couple of years, the RTA has made a concerted effort to take a leadership role in the region, industry, and nation as it relates to advocating for solutions to transit's needs. The Ride On campaign is a critical component to this effort, serving as the coordinated retail voice of the transit system, connecting riders and non-riders to the RTA, CTA, Metra, and PACE. In addition to social media, the new RTA blog, which also happens to be named Ride On, and initiatives such as Getting America to Work, the Ride On marketing campaign has helped the transit agencies effectively reach a wide array of audiences, including the over 8 million residents of northeastern Illinois. As we progress into 2016, I look forward to the continued success of the Ride On marketing campaign and the contributions to the achievement of the goals and objectives of the Regional Transit Strategic Plan. Before I finish, I want to acknowledge Nicole Berry, RTA's marketing manager, for her work on this campaign, as well as the marketing and communications staffs at the RTA, CTA, Metra, and PACE for their continued cooperation and support. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions and Ride On.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions or comments? Director Hobson?
Yeah, my primary concern and interest, of course, is the ridership, and that's the reason I voted in favor of this a year ago. You've indicated that ridership is flat, but that was consistent with your expectation for the first year of the program. For 2016, you've listed a number of actions, but it wasn't clear to me from your explanations that any of these 2016 actions were actually going to result in increased ridership. Where's the connection between the 2016 actions and increasing ridership, the overall goal of the program?
So I think that the actions we're taking, overall, the marketing itself is what's going to drive ridership growth, we anticipate. So the key is how we measure it and how long it takes. Marketing, especially when we're talking about behavioral changes, is not something that happens overnight. So the continued presence of Ride On in the market, especially with the other new entries into the travel market that we're seeing, the Ubers, the Lyfts, those type of services, the idea is that it's really key that we look at new ways of measuring ridership specifically within the target markets. So when I said that ridership was flat, the ridership being flat is not necessarily, we didn't predict or set an expectation for ridership growth in year 1 of the campaign. What we said is that the expectation was really to see the change in awareness and perception in year 1, and that we anticipated ridership, hopefully being able to see ridership growth in year 2 of the campaign. So the key is as I said, is to look at different ways we're going to measure that and take a hard look at specifically the target markets that we're targeting through this campaign, and utilizing some of the new data, hopefully, that's out there through Ventra, through the Ventra mobile app, and other sources of data that we can really try to key in on those specific markets, which are not easy to measure. So overall, I think by optimizing our approach for 2016 in terms of the marketing, we're going to drive that ridership change.
Okay, well, I'll look forward to next year's report when seeing higher ridership numbers. Thank you.
Chairman Dillard?
Tourist. I just saw the city and McCormick Place and all of our entities in the city that are worried and concerned about tourists. We have a drive and a goal as a city to become one of the top 5, I guess, foreign tourist destinations. Any you have any feel at all as to whether tourists use our system and can figure out how to navigate public transportation here?
So it definitely is a challenge that we are aware of and are working towards. I believe about 2 years ago we did a visitor survey specifically about transit utilization. And, there were definitely some findings out of that research that we are addressing in terms of data availability or information availability, how we're approaching. And I think things like going out and, our utilization of Choose Chicago's visitors guides to get it out there to people prior to coming to the region is really important, because what we find is that a lot of people plan their travel in advance. The other thing is using digital advertising through mobile, so that when people are on their phone, they're traveling, they're on the airplane or in the airport, that they're able to see our ads and say, especially we're using contextual. So if people have searched for things in Chicago, especially related to travel to Chicago, there's a good chance our advertising may pop up on their phone, because we're, as Nicole likes to say, we're stalking people. I think we are approaching these things and trying to get out ahead of people when they're making those decisions about how they travel. But, we're in there's increased competition, especially with the recent availability of ride-sharing companies and their ability to serve the airports legally, that we do have to maintain this presence and be out there so that we are top of mind as people are making their travel decisions.
I do think foreign tourists, especially if they're from Europe, are pretty inclined to use public transportation. It's in their DNA system, so they're used to it. The ad pop-ups, when or the ads, our ads, they pop up all the time, and it's great. Do you target me? So when I'm online at my law firm, is our advertising so sophisticated, like some of my political friends, that you sort of know that I use our RTA trip planner and when you stalk me? Or are those general things that my wife or my sister might see? How much is targeted to what I've done on from my computer over time?
Right. So we use a mix of contextual and remarketing. So contextual being that if you do a search or through your search patterns, we see that you're searching for certain keywords or certain things. And then once you do go, we do remarket to you.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I don't know.
So the answer is yes.
Yeah. And it works. I mean, it is incredible how many times a day I'll get the Ride On or an RTA thing that will pop up on my screen. But I was just curious how much it is because of my previous activity versus the general public that's out there. Just two observations from me on the ad campaign. It tells me a lot, and it gives me comfort when the peers, the professionals who are in this business, give Susan Massal and you and all our staff, a Telly Award. And there's a nice little, there it is. It's in a case outside. But to me, that gives me comfort. And these ads, to me, are phenomenal. I mean, the campaign is really good, but I'm a novice. But the professionals in the peer industry, to me, tell me a lot. And I also believe that these ads and I'm with Director Hobson. I mean, we want to drive ridership. We saw our statistics, and one way to help our statistics is to put more people, put butts in empty seats, so to speak. But, these ads are there to also let our riders who use our system day in and day out feel good about the system they are riding, so that they continue to use it, or they'll say, I guess I could drive downtown on Friday. I'm going to stay downtown, but you know what? I'm going to I'm going to stick with the RTA, and I'll either take the 8:30 train home from Ogilvie or wherever, or I'll grab an Uber to go home. So it's very much about letting our riders know and feel good about our system, and having our current ridership use it that extra time or two a week. So it's both a combination of trying to get new riders, but keep the people we have, and then remind our riders what a good system we really do have. So No, I think this is working, and I think it's working well.
Thank you.
Any other? Director Ross?
As a senior and a sporadic writer, I would encourage you to get people out in the field again as you did last year. As an infrequent writer, I did not have the Venture app until a chance encounter with one of those people at the station when I came in for this meeting. So I would just encourage you to do that.
That is in our media plan for, or our plan for this summer. We like to do the summer or spring rather than the winter.
Anyone else? I just have a couple comments. I'm glad to see we're doing a diverse plan because obviously our workforce and our population is diverse, so I think it's important to keep that up. And also, I think it's important to keep in mind with fuel costs keep dropping, to the chairman's points, we need to say the benefits other than, cost, peace of mind. And so I think you're right on with the right on program. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Mark. Great job. Next is the update on the availability study. Nadine.
Good morning again, directors. As you may recall, last year this board approved a contract with Collette Holt and Associates to conduct a disparity and availability study so that we could shore up our DBE program and also provide some legal support and some statistical support for a new MW and VBE program. And so before I bring up Collette, where'd you go?
She's already up behind you.
Hi. Before we have Collette start with her presentation, I want to give you a little bit of background about her personally and about her firm so that you understand how she was selected and why and the kind of work that they're doing. Basically, Collette is a Yale and University of Chicago law grad. She hails from Chicago. She was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. She was chief operating officer of the Chicago Park District for many years. She was in the city of Chicago's legal department for many years. She was a clerk to the Seventh Circuit. She started her career with a large law firm, but then dedicated herself to public service. In particular, she's been doing for over 20 years this type of work specifically, defending availability and affirmative action programs nationwide. She is literally considered to be the expert in this area in the entire country. So that's how she was selected. And without any further ado, Collette Holt.
Well, thank you, Nadine. This is on, yes. Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. I will be brief. My understanding is that you have a pretty full agenda, and so I'd like to just start with the slides that talk about the study. You have the handout so you can see a little bit about us. Just make one comment. I now live in Oakland, California for the last couple of years, but as Nadine said, I'm born and raised, and I lived here my entire life up till then. And all I can say is that people don't know how good they have it here with public transit. You go out there and they tell me, oh, we have such great public transportation. I'm like, you're kidding, right? So it's always good to be home. And I still have my Venta card, which I took from the airport last night. So it really is a remarkable system that we have here. And like so many things, you don't appreciate it until you're gone. But I certainly do now. So I just wanted to walk through where we are and what we're doing with the study quickly, and of course take any questions that you have. We certainly do believe that our overall objective is to provide you with an availability study that you can use to both guide what you do going forward, increase your outreach in the community, and defend the RTA should it be sued. Some of you may know that IDOT and the Tollway are in the midst of litigation. I'm one of their experts on that. The good news is that we won at the trial court level. We have an appeal pending in front of the Seventh Circuit right now, so hopefully we will be upheld. But we have some of the strongest, most aggressive programs in the country here, and we certainly want to help RTA to continue to do that. We are collecting contract data from your prime contractors about their utilization of women and minority and disadvantaged firms, especially as subcontractors. We have sent out email letters to your primes last week. Actually, I think it was Monday morning, and we're in the midst of collecting that data now. We expect to be finished with that hopefully in the next 4 to 8 weeks. We already have had 2 contractors respond, so that's going really pretty well, and we appreciate very much the support of the law department and the other departments here and getting that process to work. We need to take a look at what your geographic market area and what your product market is. That just means where you spend your money and who you spend it with and what you spend it on. The courts are very particular that these programs that are race or gender conscious have to be targeted to the marketplace for the agency. Certainly for your federally assisted funds from FTA, we have a solid congressional basis for you to have a program. The courts have upheld the DBE program regulations. I think we're 17-0 now, so we feel pretty confident about that. But it is important that you narrowly tailor your program to the circumstances of the RTA service market. We need to figure out who's available. Again, the courts are very picky about making sure that your goals are based on demonstrated availability of ready, willing, and able firms in the RTA's marketplace to do the types of services, provide the types of goods that you purchase. So at the end of the study, we will give you very detailed, industry-specific, weighted availability estimates. They'll be broken out for each racial group and by gender. We can slice and dice that data any way you'd like to see it, but it's important that it be very much tailored to the marketplace that you're in. We think it's also important to look beyond what the RTA is doing to the wider economy, where affirmative action and inclusion efforts are at best spotty. This is particularly important for agencies in the Chicago area who have been running very aggressive programs for a very long time. Actually, the way I got into this business was when I was the deputy corporation counsel at the city, and Mayor Daley, the second Mayor Daley, had just been elected, and we wanted to continue to support minority businesses. And so it's certainly possible that we won't find a lot of disparities in your own contracting behavior because you have been running a strong program. So we think it's important to take a look at what happens in the wider economy to see what the results might be should the RTA stop setting goals on contracts and go to what are called entirely race-neutral programs. And certainly what we expect to see, like we've seen everywhere else around the country, is that when you don't have goals and you don't have a program, you don't get inclusion. It's really no more complicated than that. We've had agencies that have been sued, dropped their programs, and seen their minority and women participation disappear literally almost overnight. That's our quantitative evidence. It's also important to go talk to real live human beings about their experiences in getting contracts and subcontracts on your procurements. And so we will be conducting interviews with business owners either a little bit later in April. I think we may be pushing them back to the first week in May now. But we will send out a very large invitation list and do a lot of follow-up and outreach in the community to make sure people know about the sessions. We ask them to come down in small groups and share their experiences, both with RTA contracts, with the service boards, and throughout the Chicagoland area in terms of being able to have fair and equal opportunities to do business. We'll also take a look at your current DBE program, with which I'm very familiar. Actually, the RTA was one of my very, very first clients back in the late 90s. So I've been doing work on your program off and on for a very long time, so I'm quite familiar with it. And, of course, I know Nadine well and from her former life when she was at the state of Illinois. And so we're going to make you some suggestions, perhaps, about what you might do differently or better. We're going to interview the RTA staff. I'll be here all day tomorrow doing that and asking them for their suggestions about what works, what might be enhanced, what they think the barriers are to DBE participation, and how the RTA, perhaps along with the service boards, might be able to make a difference in that regard. Finally, we'll come up with a preliminary report. We'll share it, of course, internally, get comments, feedback, make any adjustments we need to, and then I'll be back at some point, hopefully in the summer, to provide you with a formal report and make any presentations to the community that you would like. So I think that's it.
Thank
I
you.
promise to be quick.
Nadine?
I just wanted to add to what Colette just stated. Obviously, there's no legal requirement that you do an availability study or have any statistical basis for a veterans program. but that is part of her purview. In addition to doing the study, is also to help us shore up that program as well. So she just talked a lot about the study itself, which doesn't need to include veterans, but part of the scope of the contract is to help us shore up a veterans program as well.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Director Fraga?
There's a 3% set aside for the state for veteran loans. This is in relation to what Nadine just said. I wonder if you've done any work on that.
I have. We actually did the disparity study for Central Management Services. And, of course, they run the Veterans Program for the state. So we did take a look at that. One of the big challenges is that there are no data about veteran-owned businesses out there. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has some, but it's not targeted sufficiently to this region, so they can tell you something about veteran businesses throughout the country. But there otherwise are really no comparable data sources to what we can look at, for example, in Census Bureau data for veterans. So we have found that probably the best approach at this point, as data get developed over the next several years, it may be different, is to talk with individual veteran-owned firms as part of our anecdotal and qualitative data collection. The state, last time I checked, only had about 25 veteran firms certified throughout the entire state. So that program has been a little slow getting off the ground, but we'll do our best to identify VBEs and speak with them and include them in the process.
And just so you know, Director, what we've been doing so far is what we try to do is we use those certified firms that are on the state's list, and when we issue a solicitation that matches the services that are offered by those particular firms, we include them in the distribution list so that they know about our bids and so that they can bid on our work. That's been pretty much the extent of what we've tried to do in terms of outreach right now.
It takes a certain amount of time to get the firms registered, I think. We had the same problem with the other minority firms early on. There were very few that were on board that we could use for different projects that we were on. I just think it takes time, and thank you very much.
Director Lewis?
Thank you. First of all, Colette, I'm very encouraged with the work that you're doing. I think what Nadine and you are working is going to be very, very helpful for the work we're doing on the audit committee. So I'm pleased to see the comprehensive nature of what you've proposed, and we'll look forward to the results. Two questions. One would be, you referenced lawsuits. So it seems like there's quite a bit of litigation that takes place. Just if you could educate us a little bit more on what are some of the issues that come up there. And the second piece would be, the RTA is the umbrella organization. When we look at the service boards, your view is that the RTA, will this have implications for what might be done at the various service boards, because a lot of spending takes place at that level as opposed to at the RTA level?
Sure. Well, regarding the lawsuits, in 1989 there was a Supreme Court case called City of Richmond versus the Croson Company, and really upended almost 100 years worth of settled civil rights law, and suggested that then, at that point, that agencies that wanted to do something to increase inclusion and reduce discriminatory barriers had to go and engage in all this very intensive fact-finding. In the wake of the Croson case, there were dozens and dozens of lawsuits with people challenging the programs and basically saying you don't have sufficient evidence that there's continued discrimination on the basis of race and gender such that you can have an affirmative action program. And many, many, many programs across the country were struck down. In the wake of a lot of that, the Justice Department and the U.S. DOT in 1999 revised the DBE program regulations that govern, for example, your FTA-funded contracts. And we really started at that point to try to gather the evidence that the courts require. And so the good news is, for a long time, programs got thrown out. But we have won every case now since 2005. We have won every single case for the DBE program. Generally speaking, the plaintiffs allege that, one, there isn't that much discrimination, and two, that you don't need goals in order to fix whatever the problem is, and that smaller white male-owned companies are shut out of contracting opportunities. Those were basically the allegations against IDOT's program and the Tollways program. but we did produce a lot more evidence. I did an expert report for the tollway, and the federal district court found that there was plenty of evidence that it all is not good all the time for women and minorities in Illinois. I guess some people thought it might have been, and decided that, in fact, our programs were sufficiently narrowly tailored. The case was argued the end of the third week in January, so I can't tell you when we'll get an opinion, but I would expect in the next couple months usually. As for the effect of the study on the service boards, certainly there may be some implications there for how data are tracked. We are finishing METRA study. I'm presenting that. I'll be back in April to present that to the METRA board. We've already completed PACE. And so what we're seeing overall are good, strong programs here, but perhaps could be some targeting to specific groups more particularly. And the other big challenge has been data collection. The CTA has a very good data collection program where they're tracking contractor spend with minority and women firms. They're reporting, they're being able to monitor. Neither PACE nor METRA has that kind of system. We certainly have urged them to do that, and that might be something that the RTA may want to become involved with as well, because you ultimately are their oversight. And so if they aren't tracking data in real time, then I don't see how you can track them. So that's something I think probably will come out of the study.
Anyone? Director Totten?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colette, impressive report and goals. I don't know whether I missed it or not, but what do you do to check out whether it's a fraudulent or a front minority group?
Oh, that's great.
Which there has been.
Oh, sure. I mean, certainly dozens of people have gone to jail in Chicago for minority contracting fraud. So we know it's an issue, and it's true everywhere. I have my own little file on my computer called DBE Fraud, and so we try to keep up with that. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm the federal court-appointed monitor for the McHugh Construction Company. As a result, some of you may remember that problem from a couple of years ago. But we really are not auditors, and we're not certification people. So if the City of Chicago or IDOT tells me this is a legitimate, certified, minority-owned firm, I've got to pretty much take them at their word. We can't go back to people's balance sheets. We can't do site visits to their office. We don't have that kind of authority to do that. But when we interview people, we ask them about their experiences. Do they see fronts and frauds? If they were a certified firm that was listed on a contract, did they get the work? That's one of the biggest complaints, is that people are listed, they don't get the work, and so some front firm does the work or the prime does it themselves. So we'll ask about that. But certainly we hear those reports, and to the extent that we ever hear anything that we think could be acted on, we'll pass that on to the agency. Frankly, my experience here in Chicago now is that things are much, much, much cleaner than they used to be. The people going to jail and paying $14 million fines and whatnot will get people's attention. And so there's other places not so much, perhaps, but things seem to be reasonably clean. The data collection system that I was just mentioning before, I think is an integral part of that type of monitoring and compliance, so that you make sure that the firms that were actually listed are being used, so that they aren't being a front. And that the prime is, in fact, complying with its contractual obligations that they've made to you. So I think all that comes together with better enforcement, better education. The city's doing a much better job now about weeding out those types of firms.
And Director Totten, I'd like to point out that the RTA was one of the firms that actually did recover funds from that whole McHugh scandal a couple of years ago. So.
Cool. Anyone else? I just have, what's nice about, I'm sorry.
No, just a quick one. When do you anticipate that the study will be wrapped up?
I think our drop dead date to get you a final a preliminary report is July.
July.
And we may be a little in front of that. We're getting pretty good responses on the contract data. I think we allowed 3 months in the schedule for that, but we might be able to shave some time off that.
Wonderful. It sounds great. I look forward to it. Thank you.
You know, what's nice about these studies is it brings attention to businesses, especially with veterans, and also with people with disabilities that sometimes don't even think about certifying. So I think by bringing these studies to the attention of the public is a good thing to stimulate businesses and hopefully grow our economy and jobs, which obviously a lot of our minority businesses are in the communities that really need the help. So you have our support 100%. Great job. Thank you. Okay, I guess that's it. So if there's no more further business to come before the public session of the Planning and Administrative Committee, I will entertain a motion and a second to adjourn. Director Fryga? Director Hobson? All those in favor? Aye. We stand adjourned.